How did the First Bulgarian Empire fall? And a protracted cycle of wars resulting in its conquest by the Eastern Roman Empire in 1018. Keeping it relatively short. Long-term rivalry apart, it started with a diplomatic spat. In the mid-960s. Flushed with victories in the east, the Eastern Roman Emperor Nicephorus II from Kaz, r. 963-969 refused to pay the annual tribute that had been paid to the Bulgarians in peacetime since 896 and gave an insulting response to the envoys of the Bulgarian Emperor Petar I, r. 927-969. He followed this with a show of force on the frontier but did not advance much beyond it because he decided it was inadvisable to lead his army into a land where it would be beset by many evils. Perhaps he was thinking of the fate of his distant predecessor Nicephorus I, r. 800-811, who perished fighting the Bulgars of Krum, r. 797-814, in the Balkan Mountains in 811. Thus, at least according to the sources, a modern historian has suggested that the show of force was invented by a sympathetic chronicler to glorify the emperor. Instead, Nicephorus II approached the Kievan Rus's monarch Svjatoslav I Igorevi. 945-972 to invade Bulgaria from the north in 968, using the governor of Kurs, Kalakiras, as intermediary. The Russes did and met with great success, overrunning many Bulgarian fortresses and Svjatoslav considering moving his residence to the city of Preslavek, now Nufrol, at the apex of the Danube Delta. He and his army were recalled to Kiev when Bulgarian diplomacy roused the Pechenegs against them. Perhaps fearing the Russes, since Kalakiras was conspiring with them to make him Roman emperor, Nicephorus reversed his policy and sought a rapprochement with the Bulgarians. He betrothed the two child emperors, Basilios II and Konstantinos VE, to Bulgarian princesses and had the Bulgarian crown prince and his brother at court, possibly as honorary hostages. But when the Russes returned in force in 969 and reprised their successes, the Bulgarian Emperor Petar suffered a stroke, abdicated, and later died. His heir Boris II, 969-977, was released to assume his father's throne, but failed to stem the Russes' advance. They advanced on the capital Preslav, took the city, and made Boris II their puppet, and continuing operations against towns that resisted, like Philippopolis in Thrace. At Constantinople, Nicephorus was murdered in a palace plot and succeeded by his nephew Imenesite Tsimisces 969-976. Sviatoslav's invasion of Bulgaria, from the 14th century Bulgarian translation of the Manasseh Chronicle. When the Russes invaded Roman Thrace, the new emperor's brother-in-law Bardas Skl Raz succeeded in containing their advance by defeating them at Arcadiopolis in the summer of 970. The following spring, Imenes Tsimisces himself advanced with a great land army through Thrace, while the Roman navy sailed north to the Danube Delta and up the river. Finding the Balkan passes undefended, the emperor got through and besieged and captured Preslav, liberating Boris II and his family, but effectively holding them captive. The Roman army and fleet then advanced on Dristra, Silistra, defeated Sviatoslav himself, and offered him safe passage if he went home at a personal meeting between the Roman emperor and the Russes' monarch in the summer of 971. On his way home, Sviatoslav was ambushed and killed by the Pechenegs. The meeting between Imenesite Tsimisces and Sviatoslav I Igorevi, from the 12th century. Madrid Skylitz chronicle. Rid of the Russes, Imenes Tsimisces helped himself to the parts of the Bulgarian Empire he had overrun, renaming Preslav Imenopolis after himself and Dristra Theodoropoulos after the saint whose day corresponded to his victory. He held a triumph at Constantinople, in which he ceded pride of place to an icon of the Virgin Mary in a chariot and displayed the Bulgarian crowns and other regalia on another. Amid the celebrations, the Bulgarian Emperor Boris II was formally dethroned, divested of his imperial vestments, and appointed to the high palace rank of magistros, a sign of generosity and perhaps kindness to a relative of the underage emperors Basilios II and Konstantinos VE, although there is no further mention of the Bulgarian princesses intended for them. Perhaps at this time, Boris II's brother Roman was castrated ostensibly to make him eligible for a type of appointment at court or in the church open to eunuchs, although in reality a way of eliminating potential heirs to the Bulgarian throne from this source. Imenest Tzimiskes could now turn his attention to pressing concerns on the eastern frontier. He did not continue the conquest of Bulgaria, large sections of which were untouched in the west and were Roman only on paper. His lieutenants apparently did attempt to advance into the unconquered parts, including Raska, the heartland of later Serbia. Some parts of Bulgaria appear to have escaped any effective Roman conquest, Bulgarian emissaries turning up at the court of the German Emperor Otto I in 973. These unconquered territories in the west also became home to the fugitive Bulgarian Patriarch. The triumph of Imenest Tzimiskes at Constantinople in 971, from the 12th century. Madrid Skylitz Chronicle. On the death of Imenest Tzimiskes in January 976, the partial Roman control of Bulgaria began to slip with the revolt, or rather advance of the earlier resistance, of the so-called Komtopoloi, Count's sons, brothers, sons of the Bulgarian Count Nicola. Who headed this resistance first and from where remains unverifiable, but hosting the Bulgarian Patriarch and sending emissaries to Germany indicates an effort at maintaining the institutions of the Bulgarian state. At any rate, the Komtopoloi met with some success, although one, David, was murdered by Vlach travelers, while another, Mojsij, was killed during an attack on Thessalonik. The leadership was then shared by the remaining two brothers, Aaron and Samuel. Late in 976, Boris II and Roman escaped from Constantinople or were allowed to escape in the hope of bringing dissension among the Bulgarians. Making their way to the frontier, they were mistaken for Romans due to their palace garb. Under this misapprehension, Boris was killed, while Roman succeeded in making himself known in time. Conveyed to Aaron and Samuel, he was recognized as Bulgarian emperor, 977-997, albeit a eunuch. The formal deposition of Boris II at Constantinople in 971, from the 12th century Madrid. Skylitz Chronicle. In the 980s, the Bulgarians in the west maintained their independence and raided into Thessaly, eventually capturing Larissa in 986 or 988. A determined campaign by Emperor Basilios II. 976-1025 to capture Serdica, Sofia, failed after a 20-day siege of the city, and he was ambushed and defeated on his way back to Roman Thrace in August 986. This, and the subsequent Roman civil war caused by the rebellions of Bardas Skl Raz and Bardas Fmkaz, allowed the Bulgarians to recover eastern Bulgaria, Mosia, with Preslav and Dristra. Apart from a failed intrigue between Samuel's brother Aaron and the Roman emperor, which caused the extermination of almost all of Aaron's family by his brother, Basilios II was too distracted from other affairs to bring the Bulgarian war to conclusion at the time. Basilios II chastises Konstantinos for causing the retreat from Serdica and subsequent defeat from the 12th century Madrid Skylitz Chronicle. Basilios II began to turn the tide in the 990s. A successful campaign in 991 secured him as captive the Bulgarian Emperor Roman, who was held at Constantinople until his death in 997. Apparently he continued to be recognized in Bulgaria. Meanwhile, Basilios II conducted almost annual expeditions against Bulgaria. Samuel, effectively Bulgaria's regent, struck back with some success, killing the governor of Thessalonik, raiding as far as the Isthmus of Corinth, and finally capturing Dyrrachium, Durazzo, in 998. In 997, however, he suffered an embarrassing defeat at the hands of the Roman general Nikephoros Ouranos at the Spercheios River, escaping capture only by playing dead, together with his son. Later the same year came news of Roman's death, and Samuel was declared Bulgarian emperor 997-1040. The killing of Gr. Gorios Tarnides, governor of Thessalonik, in battle against the Bulgarians, from the 12th century Madrid Skylitz Chronicle. The course of events in the first years of the 11th century is not known in detail. In 1001, Basilios. In 1002, he took Din, Vidin, far upstream on the Danube, and temporarily occupied Skopje. Said to have been surrendered to him by one Roman Simeon, apparently conflated with the Bulgarian Emperor Roman, who had already died in Roman captivity. Samuel had attempted, unsuccessfully, to divert Basilios II's progress by attacking and capturing Adrianople. A failed siege of Pernik in 1003 apparently ends the string of Roman successes in the field for a while, with several obscure years following, although the chronicles suppose annual Roman expeditions against Bulgaria, which seems unlikely. In 1005, however, Samuel's governor of Dyrrhachion, an Armenian prince he had captured at Thessalonik, deserted to the Romans, who thus recovered the sport. The second decade of the 11th century finally brought Basilio's II definite success, albeit slowly. In response to a Roman invasion in 1014, Samuel attempted to draw off the enemy by attacking Thessalonik, only to have that army destroyed by its governor Theophylactos. Bataniades, another Bulgarian force guarding the Rupel Pass of the Balasica mountain, was outflanked by Nikephoros Xiphias, defeated and forced to surrender. Basilios II allegedly ordered the binding of all 15,000 prisoners, leaving one in a hundred with an intact eye, to guide the rest back home to Samuel. Samuel is said to have suffered a heart attack at the site and died a few days later. On 6 October 1014, he was succeeded by his son Gavril Radomir, r. 1014-1015, described as superior to his father in valor but inferior in wisdom. Basilios II profited from the Bulgarian defeat and transfer of power to temporarily take Bitola, Pelagonia, and Prilep. The next year the Bulgarians struck back, temporarily seizing Badina, Edessa, and unsuccessfully suing for peace, which Basilios II interpreted as a ruse. At that point Gavril Radomir was murdered while hunting by his cousin Ivan Vladislav, a son of Aaron, whom Gavril Radomir's intercession had saved when the rest of his family had been eliminated by Samuel. Ivan Vladislav now took the throne of Bulgaria, r. 1015-1018, and renewed the offer of submission to the Roman emperor, although a defector reported that it was a ruse to buy time. To secure his power, Ivan Vladislav had Gavril Radomir's eldest son blinded and killed. Samuel's son-in-law, the Zetan prince Vladimir, after having lured him with a promise of safety. A fragmentary building inscription records his rebuilding of the fortress of Bitola for the safety of the Bulgarians. This does seem to have helped solidify his authority, but more reverses followed. The Romans took Strumica and Kastoria in 1017, while Ivan Vladislav's appeal to Bulgaria's traditional Pecheneг allies for help failed. In early 1018, Ivan Vladislav was killed while besieging Dyrrhachion, and Bulgarian cohesion collapsed completely. Led by his son Priscian II, r. 1018, his eldest sons continued resistance from the Tomar Mountains in what is now Albania. Meanwhile, various Bulgarian nobles and courtiers submitted to the advancing Basilios II. Some at Masanopolis, others at Strumica, the Patriarch David, and Skopje, the widowed Empress Marija. Finally, Priscian II and his brothers surrendered too and were incorporated into the Byzantine court together with their mother. Priscian was appointed magistros, like Boris II and Roman before him. Basilios II led his army southward into Thessaly, recovering the province, and celebrated a triumph at Athens in 1019. The same year his lieutenants subdued Sirmium, Sremska Mitrovica, in the northwest, returning the Greek and Thracian territories to their pre-existing, Eastern, Roman administration. Basilios II divided the rest of his Bulgarian conquests into three units. Bulgaria in the west, Peristrian Peridounaban Mysia, i.e. Moesia, later sometimes called Wallachia, as were other regions in the east, Thramos, i.e. Sirmium, in the imperial frontier ran along the Danube. The fate of the Transdanubian portions of Bulgaria is unknown. The northwest had already been lost to the Hungarians by the time of Imanesi, Tzimiskes's triumph, and more may have been lost during Hungary's alliance with Basilios II. Imanest Tzimiskes had seized parts of the northeast in 971, but whether Basilios II. recovered them in 1001-1003 is unknown. At some point in the early 11th century, the northeast and the Wallachian plain became grazing ground for nomadic tribesmen. First Pechenegs, then Agas, then Cumans, at least some of the settled Slavic and possibly Wallachian population survived. Bulgaria would remain under Roman rule until 1185 or 1186. Three descendants of the Komtopuloi attempted to reclaim its throne in the interim. Gavril Radomir's son Pedar II Deljan, in 1040-1041, Ivan Vladislav's son Alusian, in 1041, and Samuel's Zetan great-grandson Pedar III, Constantine Bodin, in 1072.